Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about one of my favorite things, growing herbs from seed. Whether you want fresh basil for your pasta, cilantro for tacos, or mint for your tea, growing herbs at home is super rewarding and surprisingly easy. So grab your seeds and let's get planting. If you're new here, my name is Jara. I've been gardening all of my life and I'm a professional seed and plant nursery. I love to share my knowledge and teach others how to garden and grow food. So you've come to the right place if you want to improve your gardening skills. First, let's talk about figuring out the correct time of year to start sowing your herb seeds. I separate herbs into 3 categories. This is me personally. It's not an official thing, but it helps me figure out the correct time of year and growing conditions to plant them. The first category are traditional European types of herbs that like warm temperatures. I call them warm season herbs. Think about the kinds of herbs used in Italian, Greek, and French cooking. That would be things like basil, parsley, thyme, oregano, rosemary, lavender, and mint. They grow very well in warm temperatures, full sun, and dry soils. So what time of year does this occur for you? For gardeners in hot climates, like me here in Florida, with very mild winters, no snow, that would be fall, winter, and spring. For gardeners in temperate climates that get snow and have obvious changes between the seasons, the best time to grow herbs would be spring, summer, and fall. General guidelines say to sow seeds indoors 6 to 8 weeks before your target date of planting them in the garden. So for hot climate gardeners who want to start planting herbs in fall, need to sow seeds indoors because it's just way too hot outside, sometime in like July. Colder climate gardeners who want to start their herb garden in spring need to sow seeds indoors 6 to 8 weeks before your last spring frost date. The second category of herbs are what I like to call tropical herbs. These would be herbs used in cuisine from tropical or subtropical countries like Thailand, Mexico, or India, for example. I think of herbs like ginger, turmeric, Cuban oregano, papalo, lemongrass, and Thai basil. These herbs like full sun and very warm temperatures, often still growing in temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and they like more moisture in the soil. So what time of year does that occur for you? For me, that is the summertime. It is the hottest time of the year and I also get a lot of rain. I like to start planting tropical herbs once all danger of frost has passed in spring. For me, that is the month of April. So I sow seeds indoors 6 to 8 weeks before this target date, which lands me somewhere in mid-February. The last category are herbs that prefer cooler temperatures. I call them cool season herbs. That would be things like cilantro, chamomile, chives, dill, fennel, and sage. They really don't thrive if it gets too hot, like temperatures over 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I noticed that cilantro immediately starts to bolt or go into the flowering stage if exposed to heat. Dill and chamomile literally evaporate overnight. So these should be grown during the fall, winter, and spring for the majority of us. I like to plant them outside 2 weeks before my last spring frost date. They go into the garden earlier than the traditional warm season herbs, so I need to backtrack 6 to 8 weeks from there to start sowing the seeds indoors. For a fall crop, September is the target date to transplant herbs into the garden. If you're in a very hot climate with mild winters, it's best to wait until October when things start to cool down a little bit. So backtrack 6 to 8 weeks from your target month of planting herbs to sow the seeds indoors. Using my garden as an example, I'm in a very hot climate, so I like to wait until October to transplant the cool season herbs. So therefore I start seeds in about mid-August. At the time of this video, I was preparing for my spring planting of herbs, so I am sowing seeds for a ton of the warm season traditional European herbs. This method is the same for all herbs grown from seed, but the timing will differ according to where you're located. And if you need seeds, I have a ton of unique and delicious herb seeds on my website, which I will link below in the description. And just so you know, my preference is to grow transplants indoors so I can control the environment better than if I direct sow herb seeds outdoors. Some herbs are very easy grown from just direct sowing the seeds like cilantro and chamomile. However, others are more finicky like rosemary and sage. I get better results when I sow them from seeds indoors so I can make sure they get plenty of care and attention. Okay, so it's time to start sowing your herb seeds indoors. I say indoors only so you can control the environment. Most likely it will be too cold or too hot outside to properly sow herb seeds anyways, so that is why I keep saying to sow them indoors. I just get a mini greenhouse and set it up in an unused corner of my house or in the garage. When sowing seeds, I always recommend you give them supplemental light because in the majority of cases, the light coming from a sunny window is not enough. Once anything germinates, it requires light to photosynthesize and grow. Without enough light, seedlings will grow much slower and stretch out, reaching for more light. This causes weak stems and plants. Herbs like full sun, which is 8 hours of direct sunlight per day. I highly doubt the sunniest window in your home will give 8 hours of full sun. The cheapest option for supplemental light is some 5,000 Kelvin or higher shop lights. I usually find them for around $20 each at Walmart or Harbor Freight. However, if you have the budget, I always recommend the use of an official grow light to get the best results. I really love love these Mars Hydro grow lights that I get from Amazon. It is very intense light, mimicking the intensity of direct sunlight, and I notice a drastic improvement in the growth rate of my seedlings. Whatever the light source you choose, zip tie them to the shelves of the mini greenhouse, and voila, you have an easy to put together seed starting station. Next, let's talk about soil and container sizes. I always recommend, no matter what you're growing from seed, to use soilless and sterile seed starting mix. It is void of pathogens that cause disease to young seedlings like Dampening Off. And it's very fluffy, which helps the seeds germinate and expand their root systems. I do not recommend you use compost or soil from your backyard because it is inoculated with pathogens. You can find seed starting mix at the store. Usually I see small bags for around $7. If you are sowing a lot of seeds and need higher quantities of seed starting soil, then it might be best to mix your own. I pour equal parts of peat moss or cocoa coir with equal parts vermiculite or perlite into a wheelbarrow and mix it all together. If you can, throw in some handfuls of warm compost because it's a very gentle fertilizer for seedlings. As far as containers, if you're growing just a few herb plants, then I recommend you grow them in 4-inch size containers. If you're trying to grow a lot of herb plants, which is my case, I prefer to sow a few seeds per cell of a 72 cell seed tray. If I fill this whole tray, that is 72 herb plants. The only thing is that the herbs grow super fast. Their root systems will quickly outgrow these cells, but that's okay. Just check up on them and make sure you transplant them before they get root brown, which is exactly where they're at right now. I fill my containers or trays with the seed starting mix. I pre-moisten the soil before I start planting seeds. Sprinkle a few seeds per cell, cover with a small amount of soil, and gently water it in with the mist spray setting of your water hose. And it's the same method if you're using 4-inch size containers. Put the containers or trays under some grow lights, and in about 5 to 14 days, depending on what kind of herbs you're growing, they should germinate. Keep the seedlings warm and provide them with 8 hours of light per day. Once they grow their first set of true leaves, fertilize with a gentle liquid fertilizer. I like to use Fox Farms Grow Big liquid fertilizer because it doesn't have a strong smell, which is important since I sow the seeds indoors inside of my house. Now let's discuss some issues you may encounter while growing your herbs from seeds and how to fix them. Probably the most common issue is leggy seedlings. If you notice your seedlings are stretching in a certain direction, that is a classic sign that they are not getting enough light. They're basically reaching towards a better light source, which causes the stems to get elongated or leggy. The stems are thinner than what they should be and are weak. Lack of light also causes slower growth. To fix this, add a light source like a shop light or grow light about 5 inches directly above the seedlings. In a few days, they should correct themselves and start growing upwards instead of stretching out into a certain direction. If you correct this early on, then it's okay, but plants that have been leggy for a long time might not recover. Another common issue when trying to grow anything from seed is dampening off. This is seedling rot at the stem that kills the whole thing. Usually the rot happens at the base of the main stem, and as it progresses, the stem breaks or the seedling just kind of falls down. Dampening off is a fungus that spreads over the surface of contaminated soils, and especially in humid conditions. Spray the soil surface with 1 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water to disinfect. Allow the soil to dry out in between watering or bottom water to avoid wetting the soil surface where this fungus lives. You might also want to consider sprinkling a layer of fine sand over the soil surface to keep things more dry. But the most important thing is to start off with a sterile seed starting mix to begin with. Another very common issue when growing things from seed is that the leaves look more yellow than green. The first thing I would check is if you're overwatering. Overly moist soils cause root rot, which makes the leaves turn yellow. Allow the soil to dry out in between watering. Another issue when sowing things from seeds is that you might feel like the seeds just aren't germinating, or at least germinating fast enough. Some herbs take a very long time to germinate. If you feel like it's just taking way too long, try putting it over a heat mat to warm up the soil, or put the container or tray under a bright light source. Both of these things help speed up germination. By following my tips, your herbs should be ready to transplant in a few weeks. The root system should be developed enough that it holds the soil together when you pop the plant out to check. So let me show you how to transplant them. If you're growing your herbs in the ground or in a raised garden bed, I recommend spacing them 2 or 3 feet apart since you have more space. Some of these herbs get really big. Look at my giant Italian parsley, for example, or how big this one plant of Italian oregano is. If you're growing herbs in a GreenStalk garden tower, plant 1 herb plant per pocket. As far as growing herbs in containers or grow bags, if you're growing an herb plant that is small in size at maturity, that would be things like chives, cilantro, or chamomile, you can plant 1 for every 1 gallon of container space. But the majority of herbs get pretty big in size and require more space, so plant 1 for every 3 to 5 gallons of container growing space. I am using 10-gallon size grow bags, so I'm planting 3 herb plants in 1. And I'm filling filling my grow bags with the cheapest compost I can find. No matter how you're growing your herbs, in the ground, in raised beds, in GreenStalk garden towers, or in containers or grow bags, the planting technique is the same. Dig a hole twice the size of the root ball, sprinkle in some general purpose organic granular fertilizer. I really like to use Espoma garden tone or blood meal. Since we are growing herbs to consume their foliage, they benefit from a few applications of a nitrogen-rich fertilizer because that is the nutrient responsible for lush leafy green growth. Mix the fertilizer with the soil a little bit, pop the herb plant in, push the soil around, and water it in. In just a few weeks, you will notice new growth and your herb plants will grow into nice, large, lush plants. And that's it. Growing herbs from seed is super rewarding, and with a little patience, you'll have a steady supply of fresh, homegrown flavors for your kitchen. I can't stress how important it is to learn how to start herbs from seed because not only will it save you a ton of money, but you will have access to a wider variety of herbs when compared to what you can find locally at a store or nursery. If you found this video helpful, please give it a big thumbs up. Consider subscribing for more gardening tips, and let me know in the comments what's your favorite way to use herbs. Happy gardening, and I'll see you in the next video.